Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 84 of Cameron's Nostalgia Podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Strickland. Today I have with me Harrison Baumann. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I've been doing good.
Awesome.
Now, for any of you guys who don't know, Harrison was a levels designer for Laurana
Yep.
and some other video games too.
Yep. I've worked on Call of Duty and New Worlds or Amazon Game Studios New World. But Laurana was my capstone project in grad school.
Nice. Well, let's begin our first question.
Okay.
How did you get interested in gaming?
My interest in gaming comes from whenever I was a kid. I was diagnosed with really bad eyesight at a young age, and one of my doctors prescribed video games as a way to mitigate eye-hand coordination issues. So I've been playing games since I was a young kid. Um, Found out I could modify the games myself with mission editors and map editors, and I've been doing that for a long time. And then in grade school, um, whenever we were starting to pick our, secondary classes or electives, one of them was drafting, so mechanical drafting, architectural drafting, and at the end of if you stuck with it for 6 years, at the end you could do animation and 3D modeling, and that was really interesting to me. So I continued through the project or the through the program to get to that point. So, and then from there, uh, eventually ended up at SMU Guildhall in Dallas to get my master's in game design with a specialization in level design.
Nice. So, what was your first video game gig?
My first video game gig was a as a designer intern for a game called Reworld. It was like a Chinese Roblox style game for the mobile phone. I was only there for 3 weeks or so. Whenever Activision uh, got back with me with one of their interviews and hired me on as a quality assurance tester for Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War.
Nice. So, what was it like working on Lorena?
It's very challenging. The way that the Guildhall structures the education, it's a 2-year program that's supposed to simulate different aspects of the game industry. And it's 3 projects. The first project is a very small team, 3 to 5 developers on it, and it's mobile games. The classes range between 60 to 80 students. And then the second game is the full cohort of students are on a single project. And then for your last game project, you split into about 3 equal teams depending on the size of your class. Ours was about 17 at the time. Um, so our idea of a game was something that was simple, um, fun to play, had high level accessibility, and wasn't violent. Was like our pillars. Um, and starting from scratch, like we knew kind of we wanted a non-humanoid character for animation reasons because we only had, I think, total 8 months from start to finish. And of course, that included Christmas break, Thanksgiving break, all of those. Um, so it was a very truncated, like, small timeline to actually put together a game. Um, and we did it in Unreal Engine 4, which we had been playing around with for a while. That's what we did our second game in the whole class. So we had some experience with it. So it was interesting getting in there and developing with visual scripting tools, blueprints to create gameplay elements and to like assist the programmers because they would take their code and then import it into the blueprints to help flesh out systems. Like in Laurana, um, you had a the way you interacted with the world is like you were a frog and you squirt water on items and objects to interact with them. Part of that was like moving pillars so that you can traverse areas, which is like the puzzle aspect. And that I assisted the programmer in the blueprint aspect of like building that up so that it would work, function in the game, and then the designers could also use it well in the editor. Um, it was interesting because there was, best as I can remember, four designers on the game. I was one of the three, like building stuff out. We had a lead, and then we had um, two more in more senior or executive roles. Um, and I ended up mentoring several of the other designers in their designs. They would ask me for help or ideas, play through their puzzles. Um, then at one point there was the way that the world was built on the grid, and then at some point the building blocks got offset, and then I had to go in and make sure everything was all the right size, so that it would all fit together like Lego bricks. It was a huge accomplishment for us because we published it on Steam, so everybody can go on Steam and download it for free. Um, but it was a huge accomplishment for me.
Nice.
Some of the more interesting things is whenever we were doing the prototyping phase at the very beginning, I was doing things like putting physics on blocks and playing around with the idea of having like knockdown blocks to reveal secret areas or have animating objects flying through the worlds or big jaguars coming over walls and stuff as like you progress and hit triggers, and some of that stuff we just didn't have time to animate to the level that we wanted it to, but it's still fun to play around with those ideas and see what could be done with the engine in the short amount of time that we had. And then once it was released on Steam, um, last I checked, it had pretty positive reviews, a lot of really nice things said about it. So I enjoyed playing through it whenever I finished. And uh, part of the program was at the end, you had family come in and um, my dog came out uh, and played through your games, and watching my nephews and niece play through the game and their eyes lighting up whenever they figured something out was, really special.
I know some of the level designers that you showed you.
Hmm. That also worked on the Rana.
It was Aspen and Sierra Clark.
Yes. Yeah, she was our um, head of design, I guess you would call her. It was her vision that led to the creation of the game. She came up with the core concept and the a lot of the ideas, theming and all that.
There's Aspen there. And this is Sierra.
Uh, Sierra was also in our program, but she wasn't on our team. She was a year or two after us.
And she grew up to be a musician.
She, I don't know what she's doing now, but she did go through the Guildhall program as well.
Okay. And what about Astromind 0317?
Astromind 0317 was a Unreal tournament uh, level that I put together. That's just Unreal Tournament's a first person shooter game set in the future, space monsters and all that. Um, it was the idea of it was there's a hollowed out asteroid that is hollowed out for mining resources, and then the facility is protected by a force field that you're playing within the facility, and if you fall through the force field, you fall into space and you you die. There was that natural danger there, and also I played around with gravity. So whenever you exited the facility into like the mining areas, you floated around. So it was playing around with like a lot of environmental hazards, different gravities. There's a room off to the side that had um, the I think it was a damage boost, the U damage, which does like 400% damage bonus for a limited time, and programmed a event where if you're in a separate room that overlooked it, and somebody went into the room to get the U damage, you'd press a button and the doors would close like an airlock, and then the door to outer space would open and push you out into space. Um, that was fun to put together. That was a lot of one. That was one of the maps that I it was a solo map that I took from idea to paper map to block out to art pass. I also did the programming, um, the scripting, putting in the gameplay elements like the gravity, weapons, health, that sort of stuff. So it was like start to finish, um, outside of creating the assets because we used all assets that were available in the game or in the mod engine. So start to finish, that was just all my work. Um, I really enjoyed that process. I was towards the end of my time at the guild hall.
And what about Spaceport Fury?
Spaceport Fury was a complimentary map. It was supposed to be a trio of maps that tied together. You went from the spaceport to a ship to the Astromind. The ship map got cut, unfortunately, just due to time. But the spaceport was designed as a capture the flag map. So the other map, the Astromind was primarily team death or deathmatch, team deathmatch map. And then the spaceport was designed as a team objective map, mostly capture the flag. So it it's a larger map that was intended to use vehicles. I never got vehicles working, so they were cut from the final map. But it integrated verticality, underground interior spaces, um, different combat zones so that people with sniper rifles, shotguns, assault rifles, every weapon had its like space where it would shine within the map. Was the idea of that map. And once again, that was all my work from start to finish, outside of just the art.
And what about Interstellar Racing League?
Interstellar Racing League was the big team game from the series of three games in Guildhall. That was our team game project two, which was the whole class working together on a single project. So there's 60 plus students working on this game simultaneously. I was on the track design team. So I was tasked with, bringing interesting and creative, futuristic tracks. The idea of the game was, futuristic gravity-driven race cars that would zoom around outer space. There were different drivers, like there was a T-Rex, an alien, like a bounty hunter that you could only pick, and every car had its own strengths and weaknesses, its own speeds, its own accelerations. Um, and you knowing the stats of those cars and like the type of game that we were trying to build is, my, how I built out tracks. So I would draw out tracks on paper, and I would sit down with my design um, team, and we'd go through what we liked about which tracks and what we didn't, and then we'd build it out using a tool that was made by another one of the designers, and then art would come in and build um, art around it. The track that I built was a desert map. The coolest thing about mine is the tracks would split and then they would twist around each other and almost be like in Top Gun, where the two fighter planes were up, one was above each other, so you look across the track or across the space and see another track on the other side. But that was a very eye-opening project to go from a team of, 4 people working on a mobile game to a team of 60 plus people on a multiplayer, 3D racing game. But we were successful, and um, everyone passed that class.
And what about Shaq?
See, Shaq, if I remember correctly, that was a Hello Neighbor mod level. Um, the idea for that was outdoor spaces, seeing if I can make the Hello Neighbor um, design work in a bright outdoor space. So there's lots of trees, shrubberies. For those who don't know, the Hello Neighbor is like a stealth game where there's a lot of interactable elements in the environment. So you like take wrenches and fishing poles and all sorts of different stuff that you can interact with the environment. For example, on my map, there's play on magnetism because there's two like large electromagnets. So you have to find the generator to feed electricity to the magnets or turn the magnets off to drop tools because the magnets will pull tools out of your hands, and you'll need the tools to open vents and stuff to, the idea was to eventually find a key that would unlock the gate on the other side of the clearing so you could escape. And the entire time you're playing this, you're being hunted by the neighbor. There's this giant, um, scary guy because in the game you play as a little kid. Um, anyways, that was the idea of is playing with verticality, playing with outdoor spaces. Um, Electromagnetism played a big role. Of course, stealth, which is really difficult to design for in most games, and even more so in Hello Neighbor because there was a lot of elements that didn't. If you didn't know exactly how they worked, they would um, not work as intended, and you'd be very confused as to why. And there wasn't a lot of documentation as to like what did what that we had access to. Um, and that was a fun iterative process going through because I played a lot of stealth games, but I've never built anything stealth related up until that point.
And what about Renegades Home?
That was a Fallout 4 mod. I'm trying to remember that one. That one, I took a vacant building in downtown Boston and added an interior to it as part of a quest line that you could get by a radio signal on your Pip-Boy. Um, so as you like walk around downtown, once you were past a certain player level, you'd get a message, and if you listen to the radio station, there was a call for help to go to this location and rescue. I don't remember what the faction was at this point, but anyways, they were under attack by a bunch of ghouls or mutants, and you would proceed through the level, and there was a branching quest line, like you could go to the source and blow up a vault door where the ghouls were coming from, or you could go help as like kind of a last stand sort of um, mission upstairs, and they would offer different rewards depending on which one you chose. That one was also really interesting because in the last stand battle, it was like a timed wave thing where there's increasingly more and more enemies coming at you, and I gave the players, I think, a rocket launcher and a minigun to hold off the waves. But that mod was just me. Um, there was no team, just using already made assets in the creation kit engine.
And what about Sufferon Bridge?
Sufferon Bridge, that was the very first Unreal Tournament map that I made in school. Um, Took inspiration by several iconic Halo maps. Um, with the idea being that there was two bases connected by a bridge. Um, I mean, there's also several older Unreal Tournament maps that were very similar. Uh, Face Off is one of them, and um, that was again, start to finish, that was a solo project using already created art assets. But it was a team deathmatch slash capture the flag style map. There's a lot of or not a lot, but there was an amount of verticality because you use like jump portals to get up high in the ducting. So you got like sneak around behind the base, drop down, capture, grab the flag, then you'd have to run through the base, back to yours, across the bridge to capture it. And there was a upper and lower bridge. You could drop down in the middle of the upper bridge to get to the lower bridge, but if you're on the lower bridge, I think there was a jump pad that you could get up, but you have to cross a certain amount. Um, that was a really fun map to play around with. But it's a bridge suspended between two walls of a canyon. The idea being like it was a base and you're connecting another base, and then that's where the battle was taking place.
Nice. So, what was it like working on Call of Duty Cold War?
That was a really interesting project for me, mostly because it was quality assurance, which I hadn't necessarily done a whole lot of, prior to that. I mean, I tested my own stuff, um, but never at that level. And essentially, it was this was during COVID, so I was working from home, and everybody would log in to a Zoom meeting basically to check in and figure out what we were doing for the day. And I started right after, it's right before release, and then I tested all of the downloadable content packs um, throughout the life cycle of the game. So I'd go in and test all the new weapons, test all the new maps, make sure all the new skins worked, the new zombies maps worked. There was a dedicated zombies map team. I wasn't on that one, but so they would get all of the spoilers and how to do everything, uh, and then they couldn't tell anyone. And then we had access to the maps and stuff as a little bit later, but we never got any of the how tos or anything. So we had to figure that out on our own. But it was really interesting in a playing video games in a professional way. It was very methodical. Like we had a list of things that we had to test, and we'd go through and test each one, and then we'd write up a bug report, very specific manner, submit that to the developers to get fixed. And like I said, that was about a year's worth. I was on that project for about a year. It was, yeah, but it was very interesting.
And what about New World?
I spent over 3 years on New World. I was brought on by Lost Boys Interactive was the or the company I was working for. We were hired by Amazon Game Studios to come in and help with their game New World. See, I was the second designer from Lost Boys to join that team. So I was learning from the ground up for our team, procedures. It was a new engine to us, how their engine worked, how they placed enemies, all that sort of stuff, all the lore, because the game had just been released right as we started. So we helped with the next expansion that came out, which is like the Burning Sands expansion, or not Burning Sands. That's wow, shoot, I forget the name of the expansion. It was the first free expansion. It's set in the desert with a bunch of Egyptian themes. So I helped with enemy placements on that. I helped with the Christmas and Easter events. And then I helped redesign a couple of the early places of interest because they added these tiny alligators that they needed to figure out where to put them, and mages or shamans. So I went in and rebuilt a cavern to put those in, and then there was several um, skeleton encampments that had to be redone because the flow wasn't right, and a lot of players are getting bottlenecked there. There's too many enemies like on the road and not enough spread out. So I went back and refactored all of those for playability. And then as our team grew to about 100 at one point on the Lost Boys side, we were uh, pretty much um, told that we were going to be working like it was our part of the game to be the next DLC was what we were going to be working on next. So we kicked around a bunch of ideas, ended up settled on like a wild, like nature gone wild idea where you fought elephants and giant chameleons, lions, gorillas, and like giant plant monsters. So we took an existing zone in the game, stripped it to the ground, rebuilt it back up. Um, and I was given about a third of the areas that you would visit, told, this is what this area used to look like. It's now overgrown or what have you. Or now there's like, for example, I was given a beach area that it was just some shipwrecks. I was like, well, it'd be really cool if like this ancient obelisk thing rose out of the sand in response to this cataclysm going on. So I designed that, sketched that out and um, helped the artist build that from the ground up, and then went and populated it with enemies and um, events and stuff for the players to interact with. Uh, and then we took another mid-level area and revamped that one as well. That first expansion, the took about a year. The next one took about another year. Then our team started winding down um, in size, and we worked on some multiplayer stuff, and then eventually our team was let go. And then that was the end of our participation with that game.
Nice. And what about Rise of Angry Earth?
The Rise of the Angry Earth was the nature expansion to New World, where we took an existing area, um, took it down to the ground and rebuilt it in a new vision. That in the lore, Artemis comes back as like a nature wielding being. Over the course of the main story, the player angers her, and she turns evil. And at the end of the arc, throughout the zone, you end up fighting her at the very end. But it was a challenge because we got new enemies that we built from the ground up. that we had to account for. It was the wild beasts, which were like these like half plant, half animal creatures. Um, there was the actual nature, which was like bears, lions, gorillas, chameleons, and mammoths. And then we redid some of the ancients for that zone as well, which are like skeletonized immortal beings that you had to fight. So like I said, we took a whole zone, brought it down to the ground and rebuilt it for a new player experience at the in game.
Nice. Well, Harrison, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Cameron. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Thank you for this opportunity, and I hope everything is going well up there.
Nice. Stay tuned, there will be more guests coming up. Until next time,
Over.
peace.